Utah Jazz and Portland Trailblazers are both in the midst of a rebuild, and their key pieces are Keyonte George and Scoot Henderson. Do they have anything? Either of them? Both of them? It's next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. We are also available on YouTube. Please subscribe, follow. We're trying to get to 10,000 YouTube subscribers. I don't know how many Apple and Spotify subscribers, but would like to get those too. So thank you. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell button. It's all vanity project. Just let me do it. And to the everydayers, you're the best. All right, here's what we got today. We're going to finish up our 240, which is the look at the Eastern Conference and which things, and look at the Kawhi Leonard injury and the impact of that on the 240, because that changes things dramatically if he's out indefinitely. Final preseason game tonight with the Jazz. What are we looking for? Will Hardy's been amazingly consistent with his rotation. We've learned a lot, and we're starting on whether or not Keyonte George or Scoot Henderson are the real deal for either of these two franchises that are in the midst of a rebuild right now. These are the key pieces. So let's start there on Locked On Jazz today, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last year, both these teams are rebuilding. Both these teams, an outside observer will look and say, they're in the midst of a rebuild, post-Dame Lillard, post-Donovan Mitchell, post-Rudy Gobert. Do either of them have a piece yet? The Jazz have Lauri Markkanen. The Blazers have Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant, maybe DeAndre Ayton. But of the new pieces, does anyone have a piece yet? And there's no clear answer, because Keyonte George and Scoot Henderson are the headliners for both these two franchises. And both of them had scary poor rookie years. So Keyonte George shot 39% from the field and 33% from three. We've talked about, we saw signs. We know we're there every day. And the last part of it seemed really unfair to him. Scoot Henderson shot 38.5% from the field and 32.5% from three. Well, when I say both of them had scary rookie years, the reason I say that is if you do a search through NBA history of rookie guards who play at least 50 games, shoot below 40% from the field, below 35% from three, and are drafted in the first round. Okay, so they had a lot of ability. There are 57 of them. 57 players drafted in the first round, played 50 games, shot below 40% from the field, shot below 35% from three, and were first round, actually 1 through 25 pick is what I did. And only 10 of those have turned out to have a high-level career. Now, worth noting, Scoot Henderson at 19 and Keyonte George at 20 are two of the younger players to ever do this. But honestly, the youth doesn't seem to say that there's a better chance for revival. In fact, the opposite, I would say this. Almost all the players who had this bad a year at 22 and up, that's a real panic button. Of the 57 players who did this as a rookie, 24 of them were 22 years or older, and only one of those 24 turned out to have like a pretty good career. Mookie Blaylock falls into that, having a pretty good career. Derek Fisher had a really good career. I'm not sure that that's what you're looking for out of your primary guard, who's one of your franchise pieces. Bobby Jackson had a pretty good year over time coming out of Minnesota as a backup guard. So there's a few of them that kind of check that. But so in some sense, the fact that our guys are young gives them a little bit more window here than otherwise. Those guys that are 20 and under, which is 24 of them, kind of split evenly, interestingly enough, do include Marcus Smart, Russell Westbrook, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Gary Harris, turned out to have a nice career, Malik Monk. So there's 5 of the 23 or 4 that were 20 or below that have panned out. 5. Not a great numbers. Little scary. In fact, if you look at win share of the 57 players who shot 40%, below 40% as a rookie, below 35% from 3, played 50 games, and were drafted in 1 through 25, who had a win share, Scoot Henderson's win share is the second worst, minus 1.7 last year, of any of the players other than Emmanuel Mudiay. Keyonte's is not super. Keyonte George is minus 0.3. The success stories of players who had this kind of rookie year that went on to have established high-level NBA career, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about whether or not the Blazers or the Jazz have a piece. Are Jason Kidd and Chauncey Billups, 2 Hall of Famers, Marcus Smart, Jason Williams, Sacramento Jason Williams, Lonzo Ball before his injuries, Russell Westbrook, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And then it falls off pretty fast. Then you're into the Trey Burke, Kyra Lewis Jr.'s, Ben McLemore, Marcus Barnes, TJ Ford, Jeff Teague is another one who I'd say. Kemba Walker, good success story in there. Malik Monk has bounced back. Mookie Blaylock, who I already mentioned. Gary Harris, who I already mentioned. And Jamal Crawford. The second part for both these guys in their rookie years that was at least probably unnerving is last year, if you looked at guards who ran 1,000 pick and rolls, there were 61 of them. Keyonte was 61st out of 61st in efficiency, and Scoot Henderson was 55th out of 61st. So the huge story for both these franchises this year is whether or not Keyonte George and Scoot Henderson are something real. Well, we're into year 2, and there's some exciting signs for both these franchises. Let's start with a pick and roll. Only 30 pick and rolls, only preseason sample size. But of those players that have run 30 pick and rolls in the preseason, Keyonte George is the 3rd most efficient, and Scoot Henderson is the 5th most efficient. Just to give you an idea, Fred VanVleet is 1, former Jazz player Jared Butler for Washington is 2, Keyonte is 3, Dame Lillard is 4, and Scoot Henderson is 5. Some more positive signs. Keyonte George looks dramatically different. We've watched him every day. He looks terrific. He's been absolutely great in the preseason. He's shooting 51% from the field and 44% from 3. That's quite a turnaround. Scoot Henderson, on the other hand, 39% from the field and 33% from 3 in the preseason. So while he's running the pick and roll well, a little unnerving. Specifically the pick and roll, it's interesting because Keyonte George and John Collins were the least efficient combination in the NBA last year. And instead now we're seeing Keyonte George running it much more with Walker Kessler, which is a brand new relationship, really. They ran the pick and roll last year together only 286 times. They weren't great. It generally takes a guard 5,000 pick and roll runs before they get over a point of possession. Scoot Henderson and DeAndre Ayton last year ran 483. They were the exact same efficiency as Keyonte and Walker, and neither were great. In fact, Scoot Henderson's best combination was Jabari Walker, which is probably not a long-term solution. So if you're the Blazers and you're the Jazz, really, quite frankly, this entire year's number one storyline for both these two franchises, and I talked about this a lot in the NBA preview, is which one of these two guys is going to pan out and to what level. Both hope still that they have a major piece. One of their 2 or 3 key pieces for the future of their franchise is Keyonte George's 16th pick or Scoot Henderson, the 3rd pick. And if that's not the case, it makes a big change to where they are in the rebuild process. And if it is the case, it makes a big change to where they are in the rebuild process. Because if you have one of your pieces, now you can start building. If you don't, it's a big deal. And year 2 might be too early for 2 19 and 20-year-old kids to decide, but the early indicators of year 1 are harsh. And so what they do in year 2 is particularly important. And that's what makes tonight's matchup interesting, but also makes the parallel pass of these two franchises that will probably be involved in SAG for flag so interesting in this season. Final preseason games tonight. Will Hardy's been very consistent about his rotations. What have we learned that we know is going to move forward? Plus, 240 for the Eastern Conference coming up as well here on Locked on Jazz. Friday edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by my friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. The Hyundai, it's a fabulous car. When you start to put together, at least for me, when I looked at bells and whistles features, price, and safety features. So those are the 3 things that I looked at that I want in a car. Every single time I get all the bells and whistles, I get past all the safety, and I get the best price on the Hyundai. So I've bought 2 Santa Fe's and an Ioniq 5. And the service and treatment I get from the Murdoch's, unbelievable. They call it the no regrets approach, and that's absolutely what I've experienced every single time I've been to Murdoch Hyundai. So if you're in Logan, Linden, or at Murray, 4646 South State Street, and you're going to stop by, email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, and let me get you the VIP treatment that you deserve at Murdoch Hyundai. That's dlock09 at Murdoch Hyundai. Today's show is brought to you by Hims. Are you looking for a little better performance, possibly? A little better opportunity to up your game, shall we say? Oh, that pun was so good. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. Just answer a series of questions on the site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed. One low price covers everything for your treatments ongoing. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you, and your performance can be uplifted. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's Hims, HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatments. Hims.com/lockedon. This product mentions are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price vary based on product and subscription play. Hims.com/lockedon. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked on Jazz today, and all of those of you who are participating in our YouTube community polls. I really appreciate it. It's fun to kind of get your guys' opinion on everything. We've had a bunch of good ones recently, and they're always kind of based off of the show today. Yesterday was off the Western Conference 240, and the question I had for you is, which team do you think is most at risk due to the lack of 240 established minutes of players? And 48% voted Clippers. You were right. And it turned out Lakers 25%, Nuggets 19%, Bucks 9%. Also, what aspect of Keyonte George's preseason performance excites you the most? 50% said his shooting accuracy and 42% said his leadership and vocal presence. I think those are all very accurate. All right, preseason game number. And by the way, thank you to those who sent me the screenshot of signing up for the newsletters, which are supposed to launch on Monday. We'll see if we get there. It's a little touch and go. Like, it's big company, big launch. We'll see what we get out by Monday. You guys are getting the inside scoop of how it all works. I am absolutely not one of these people who's like scared to mention that things are really hard to get off the ground and try to build and all these kind of things. So I'm just sharing it with you. Newsletters.lockedonpodcast.com, I think, was the site if you want to go sign up. You don't need to yet. You can wait till it's not like that's not our official landing page. That's like kind of our temp site right now. But you're welcome to check it out at newsletters.lockedonpodcast.com. Get your free NBA newsletter. Scan down. Click on Locked on Jazz. Actually, Locked on Jazz is up a little higher. Click on and do it. So be fun. All right. Final preseason game tonight. It's really been interesting. There's been almost no adaptation to the rotation at all. Will came out in the first night. Walker Kessler is now your starting center. John Collins and Jordan Clarkson were coming off the bench. Colin Sexton and Keyonte George were playing together. Isaiah Collier and Jordan Clarkson were playing together. And he was finding a way to get Bryce Sensabaugh and Cody Williams on the floor at the same time, which I didn't think he could do. I said early on, I thought at some point Drew Eubanks would have to start or get into the rotation because I thought, and I still wonder on that second unit whether there's enough defense. And it's actually looked really, really solid. Like, in fact, one of the things that's been most impressive to me has been John Collins. But John Collins playing in the second unit might be a really good answer. One, he's offensively good enough to go up against starters. Defensively, he seems to have been, to my opinion, a bit more active and more engaged than he was prior, or more impactful. Maybe not more engaged. Engaged implies he wasn't engaged. More impactful, maybe going up against a lesser talent some of the time. And then he's able to answer with such great offensive skill that actually looks like it's working really well for him. Walker's been very good defensively, and the Jazz have shot the ball amazingly well. So it's interesting to me. I don't think I really expected that you'd come into camp, have an opening day starting lineup, and then have it play out exactly as the year went on or as the preseason went on. You usually see some changes and adaptations and things like that, and we haven't seen that at all. I would suspect tonight that everyone plays about a half, by the way. I don't think there's a lot of value. I don't think you're getting guys in shape anymore for the regular season by playing them the second half of a preseason game. I would suspect we see a rotation of the first half, and then we get to see some of the other guys in the second half. By the way, I mentioned this, and I just want to back it up with numbers. Jazz defensive rating with Walker on the floor in the 5 preseason games is 100.4. He and Lowry have been kind of matching minutes together, and with Lowry, it's 100.9. With Walker off the floor, it's been 107. So that's exactly what you're expecting out of Walker and the starting lineup. If you're going to play Taylor Hendricks, Lowry Markkanen, and Walker Kessler, which is going to be a offensively challenged lineup with some of the spacing between Walker and Taylor, you are expecting it to be a really, really, really good defensive lineup. Now, something weird is happening in Taylor Hendricks' minutes when he's not on the floor with Walker Kessler because his defensive rating is really poor otherwise. So I don't know whether those are – I have to dig into it, and it's preseason, and it's probably not worth digging into all that much, frankly. But it's kind of worth noting that Taylor's non-Walker minutes aren't great. The other one that was worrisome to me early in the preseason was the starting lineup's offensive minutes. To me, they were really struggling, small sample size, but it did feel a little bit like, oh, gosh. And we'll see whether or not that turns out to be the regular season. I mean, what's a little kind of a bit of a misnomer on all of these things is it's preseason, and you just haven't seen the scouting reports. It's where even the Scoot Henderson and the Keyonte George lineups that we were just talking about, and all their, particularly the Keyonte, such encouraging numbers here in the preseason. I do think there's some real value to those, but I wonder whether, or not, a defensive now comes out with a game plan and this and that. But what I'm seeing from Key doesn't look like it's going to be defensive related. He just looks so much more in control and so much better and so different in year two. It's super exciting to see on that. All right, there's one Eastern Conference team whose 240 is a bit unnerving. We'll touch on that when we come back here on Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by the official sportsbook of Locked On, which is FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook of Locked On Podcast Network, and FanDuel's got great deals for you right now. All right, let's get to the big one, the big deal right out of the way. Let's get it there for you. Here's what FanDuel has for you. It's the big return from America's #1 sportsbook. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Also, when you have a hunch in the middle of the game, you want to check out the latest stats, you play-by-play. So much more. You can go to the same page where you make your bets at FanDuel.com. FanDuel Sportsbook, NFL weekend ahead of us. Also, the Yankees and the Guardians. What a game last night. They've got a bunch of marks. Yesterday, everyone had 2+ bases, by the way, if you played that game they're playing. Shohei to hit a home run is plus 360. In game 5, the Dodgers are a game and a half or a run and a half favorite. NFL this weekend, since we've already got the Broncos off the board, interesting one. Minnesota is a 1.5 favorite against Detroit. That's probably the marquee game of the week, other than the Niners are a 1.5 point favorite against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl recap. That's all at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available at all podcasting apps, so it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, everydayers. You're the best. I greatly, greatly appreciate you. Okay, so for those of you who missed it, yesterday we did our first season preview show. We'll do points gained over the weekend. I'll do points gained over the weekend and have those ready for you Monday and Tuesday. This is the roster building part of it. It's called 240, and the concept is that every team has to have 240 possible minutes of basketball, and that kind of gives you an idea of who the championship contenders are or are not, is whether or not their roster is full. So let's start review yesterday in the West. There were 6 teams that came out with 240, a complete roster. They have rotation minutes every time. A bunch of teams, the Warriors, the Thunder, came out with more than 240, actually. But the 240 were the 3 title contenders, the Thunder, Minnesota, and Dallas. And then Phoenix was in the group, which leads me to believe that Phoenix will probably end up being a home team playoff 4th pick there. Sacramento and the Warriors also had 240. Then Memphis came next. If you had Zach Edey playing 22 minutes a night, we'll see whether that works at 227. Then the Rockets come in at 224 with 3 question marks. The Pelicans went at 213, the Lakers at 212, and the Clippers at 211, and Denver at 198. Huge numbers, all of which made them very susceptible to Kawhi Leonard being out indefinitely. So the Clippers lose 34 minutes without Kawhi Leonard. They dropped down to about 170 NBA minutes or 180 NBA minutes. The only team with less than that is the Utah Jazz at 161. The Clippers are full out a lottery team, and they don't own their pick. Oklahoma City owns it. Wow. All right. Over in the East, 4 teams came in at 240. And they are Boston, well over 240. Cleveland, the Knicks with Shamet, but no Robinson. So when they get Robinson back, they're well over. And Orlando. Orlando's built themselves a complete roster. The next tier is still pretty high. Philadelphia's at 234, but they're relying on Lowry, Gordon, and Embiid. Milwaukee's at 230 with DeLon Wright in that group. He probably deserves to be, but it could drop them to 220. Miami's at 230. My surprise is that Detroit, with the additions of Tobias Harris and some others, is at 226. And Indiana is at 225. Not quite the 210 danger zone, but Indiana's a little thinner than you think an Eastern Conference finalist team of a year ago would be. Chicago 223, Toronto 218, Charlotte falls at 200. Atlanta is at 198, relying on Russia, Shea, Daniels, and Bufkin, none of which classifies established NBA minutes yet. Brooklyn in the SAG for flag is at 198, and the Wizards are at, or 169, excuse me, for Brooklyn, 169, and the Wizards are at 160. For those who missed it yesterday, Jazz are at 161. What's the big takeaway from this from the Eastern Conference? I think Philadelphia, even though they're high-powered Embiid and Paul George, are a little more shaky than people are saying. Orlando is going to win a lot of regular season games of that depth. And I think Detroit might be more viable than we think, and Indiana could be a little shakier than we think, would be my quick takes on that. Now, the 240 system is it is what it is. It doesn't, right? A Tyrese Halliburton minute counts the exact same as a TJ McConnell minute. And those aren't clearly the same in Indiana. And so when you have a team like Denver that's particularly top-heavy, this system is very concerned that Julius Strawther, who has had a very good preseason, is just not ready yet. And that comes back to really bite someone like Denver's like unnervingly low. And so they need, if somebody steps up and becomes a rookie like Christian Brown did for them before, then they've done it again. They've got another guy, and Jokic has got to be the easiest player in the world to play with. And so it gives you an opportunity to get those guys to play well. But this is just a projection. Points gained, which we'll do Monday and Tuesday next week, is much better on actual really telling you where teams are going to rank offensively, and has had some really good success over the years. 240 to me is just a conceptual thing that 82 games means you have to have a complete roster. And if you don't have a complete roster, at some point in those 82 games, you're going to get caught. In the case of the Clippers, they got caught before the season started. In the case of, we'll see what happens with Denver and some of these other teams of whether or not they run out of guys. And then they get short. The concept also is important, is if you're at 210, so that you have 210 NBA rotation minutes, you're 30 minutes short, and a player gets hurt, it's not like you had extra on the bench, or else you would have been playing 240. So when you lose a player who plays 30 minutes a night at 210, you're down to 180. Boston, Oklahoma City, the Warriors, a few others are at 255, 260. So they actually lose a player at 240. They're actually fine. They'll still be at 240. We'll see. Hey, all these things are just experimental. We're trying them. I'm sharing them with you, and then we'll keep track of how they do or don't. Too. All right, late night one tonight, 8 o'clock Mountain Time. Make sure you get it on SEG Plus. Make sure you've subscribed for the regular season for SEG Plus. You'll get both the hockey games and boy, are they exciting right now, the crushing injury they just got. Get the games on SEG Plus streamed. I have it. It's set up great. It's on my phone. It's on my Roku. It's on my Amazon Fire in my house. It's so cool. So go get it done at SEG Plus. Thanks very much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz today. For those of you on video, we'll send you the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today. Those of you on audio, check out Locked On NBA.